Today, Grade.com talks with Kristen Aldrich, who is the program director of Reach Out and Read of Greater New York. If you have not heard of them, they are a research-driven organization that provides children with books during pediatric checkups so that families can read to their children at home. If you're new here to the podcast, please press subscribe on YouTube and your podcast app, because today we are going to learn why books are so important to the youth and some things that we could or should be doing to ensure the next generation is set up for success. Ms. Kristen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here today.
Of course. In my introduction there, my little pre-cut written introduction, I gave program director as a title. But as I went down the rabbit hole of you and what you have going on, I found you're a bit more than program director. There's a bit more than meets the eye. You have hit several organizations and had quite the impact up in sort of northeastern United States. Can you just share a bit about yourself and how you've gotten to this point?
Yeah, sure. I would be happy to. So early childhood education it still is, but when I was in college, it was an unexpected passion. I knew I was very interested in the informal education field, so the world of cultural institutions, libraries, museums, that sort of a thing. And I spent a summer between junior and senior year of college working for the Philadelphia Museum of Art in their summer camp. And the whole thing mesmerized me. I had the supervisor, his name is Barry King, and he has such a passion for kids and really just, instilled that in all of us. And where I really felt most comfortable and most excited were the youngest kids. And so preschool was my sweet spot. And so things just kind of developed from there. And that's where I continued to seek opportunities. So I spent some time working at the Please Touch Museum in Philly, which is their children's museum, a really wonderful place doing community outreach. And then I found myself in New York City, the one place I told myself I would never, ever move to. I have now been here 8 years. Whoops. Yeah. But I got a really incredible job working for the New York Public Library and their education department. And I had helped establish this after-school tutoring program at the Inwood branch of the New York Public Library. And for those not familiar with Manhattan geography, that is the most northern point of Manhattan that you can get to in terms of neighborhoods. Really incredible neighborhood, great people, great food. And it was a great program, but I was working with 1st through 8th graders. And again, my sweet spot were the younger kids. And around that time, this was, I want to say like 2014, 2015-ish, there was a big push to build an early childhood education department at the library. And they're like, oh, well, nobody here has any experience in this. And that's when I was like, me, I have experience. Yeah. This is actually what I really want to do. And so I had the privilege and honor of founding the early childhood ed department at the New York Public Library, where I worked with over 88 branches throughout the Bronx, Manhattan, and Staten Island, and started as a team of just myself and working with all the children's librarians at all of those branches and different community-based organizations to eventually building out and sustaining a team of 4 full-time staff underneath me who are still there. After I left, it was wonderful. This woman named Eva Shapiro was promoted to take my spot, an incredible early childhood educator with a concentration in working with children with developmental disabilities. And it was just this really incredible experience to build something from the ground up, especially at an established institution, and really bringing intentionality behind children's librarianship practice when it comes to early childhood education. Children's librarians are very much early literacy experts, but then layering on that added piece of early childhood development and early childhood ed. So I was able to build out different trainings in partnering with CUNY's Early Childhood Professional Development Institute, create family programming. It was just amazing. And then from there, so I'm still another job away from my current job. From there, I worked for a little over a year at the Clinton Foundation and their initiative, Too Small to Fail. And that was really incredible because I got out of New York, right? We were based in the city, but I was able to work with different early childhood initiatives all across the country. And of course, my heart very much still in New York, but I will say the two standouts for me were the programs happening in Detroit and the state of Michigan in general. Great Start Collaborative of Wayne County in Detroit is just amazing, as is Brilliant Detroit in terms of what they're doing for early childhood ed. And then also Miami. And I originally grew up in Florida, so it was kind of cool to be back in my home state, making a difference there as well. But Miami is just doing some really incredible work in early childhood ed. And with that, experience and kind of taking it, what's happening outside of this lovely little New York bubble, when this opportunity came along to work as a program director for Reach Out and Read of Greater New York, it was kind of a no-brainer. I was really excited to come back to New York and work more intensely with specific populations. And then also with this job, this is honestly the first job I've held in the early childhood ed field where it's so focused in what we do. We're I say just like, it's not a lot, but we're working only with pediatric providers. And what I was doing with the public library and with Too Small to Fail, we're working with all different factions of early childhood. Pediatricians are in there, early childhood educators, cultural institutions, community-based organizations. It's a little bit of everything, which is really incredible. However, I've found that you can really make a much deeper impact when you're just focused on one area. And so in working with Reach Out and Read, just in the field of pediatrics, it's given me an opportunity to make my expertise deeper in this one instance.
Totally. Yeah. When you become an expert and you allow yourself to get 3 feet wide, but 3 miles deep, right? The impact that you can have when you niche down it is substantially more, just greater. I started this question with the label of a program director. I'm going to help you guys come up with a better title. It'll say something wizard, but thank you for giving me the walkthrough there. Your journey is amazing.
Thank you.
I want to ask, really, I want to try to zoom in on Reach Out and Read the New York region, sort of your area. But before I do that, just give me the broad stroke of Reach Out and Read as a whole. Talk to me about the organization, what you guys do, what you're trying to solve. Give me the broad stroke, sort of elevator pitch, if you will.
Yeah. So Reach Out and Read was started in 1989 and it was based in Boston. And since then, it's really just flourished in every state. So there's an affiliate, Reach Out and Read, in every state, and it's either run by their own nonprofit or a division of the American Academy of Pediatrics, or is supported directly by Reach Out and Read National, which is still, still based in Boston. And the core of what we do, no matter what state you're in, is we train pediatricians and other pediatric providers, so physicians associates, nurses, nurse practitioners, health educators, really anyone that might interact with a child ages birth to 5 and or their family and caregivers. And we train them in early childhood development, as well as early literacy best practices. And so every well child visit that happens, and the well child visit is just a checkup. And so from the time a child is born till they're 5, they have a lot of checkups. They should have, I want to say it's like close to 15 different checkups at least. from 6 months to 5 years old, they have at least 10. And then in the first 6 months of a child's life, that's where the visits are more frequent, also depending on what's happening with the newborn. But what they do is they go in, a child and their caregiver go in for the well child visit. And the way it starts off is with a book, a developmentally appropriate book. And they use the book as a developmental screening tool. So they give the book to the child, no matter how old the child is, of course, unless they're a brand new newborn, and they don't have quite those motor skills yet to grasp the book. They'll give it to the adult, and they'll watch them interact with the book and kind of get a read on what's happening with this child's development, not only from a literacy standpoint, but also from a motor skills standpoint, also from, is the parent or caregiver comfortable interacting with their child? Is there something that might seem a little off? Do they maybe need a little bit of support? And so in this interaction, they're really able to not only assess the child's development, but then also encourage parents and their kids to read together at home. And this happens at every single well child visit. And it's really incredible to see this piece of books being this universal language, right? Even if there is a language barrier. And that one of my favorite types of books, and some people think I'm a little bit crazy, but I love wordless picture books specifically for that reason. And, all you see are images, and it's this sometimes intimidating tool to really just tell a story and to bond with your child and to, spend that moment in time while also creating your own story.
You have a recommendation or a favorite wordless book?
Oh, the first one that comes to mind is this book. I think it has a couple of words in it here or there, but it's called Marlowe, Marlo.
Marlowe.
And I cannot remember the name of the author, but it's this little dog who goes on these underwater adventures. And the illustrations are just beautiful.
I love it. I love it. Even we're talking the impact and the engagement with children, even adult wise. I follow a couple folks. Carl Richards comes to mind. He's the sketch guy, and he takes these really complex finance topics and he draws stick figure drawing, 4 or 5 very simple lines with a marker, and he tries to describe a very complex finance topic with just very simple drawings. And he'll make a calendar. I mean, he makes hundreds of thousands of dollars off these very simple things. Jack Butcher is another really good one. There's something about visualizations that triggers something different than reading a bunch of words or a blog post or a story. I want to put a pin in your approach to this problem because I do want to circle back to that. If I zoom in, we talked about reach out and read as a whole. If I zoom in on the New York area, do you feel that your region in particular has any unique problems, issues? Do your students test the same as the rest of the US? Are you facing any unique challenges, or do we find that each organization, the 6,100 program sites across the country, that you guys are all facing about the same problem?
We're definitely facing very similar issues, and the core of what we're trying to do is really create an even playing field in terms of access to high quality education and whole family support, right? Our whole approach is a 2-gen approach. We want to make sure that the parent and caregiver is supported so that they can then in turn support their child. But I will say that with New York, if you just look at the borough of Queens, there's the largest number of languages other than English spoken. I think it's for any square mile or something in the entire country. And so we know that our books that we can order or get donated in English or English and Spanish are going to be pretty good. They're going to be high quality, all of these things. But when we start talking about smaller niche languages, and these populations are significantly underserved in our communities, on the whole, right? It's not just through us not serving them in the way that they need to be served because we don't have these resources yet, but it's also, there aren't the same level of community programs for them. And so the language barrier can be very big. That's also, again, why I mentioned wordless picture books too, because it is this unifying piece of material
Totally.
during the appointment.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I didn't expect that answer, and that is a super interesting answer. I mean, how have we gone about, or what is the solution to that problem? It's a very interesting, it's a very unique issue to solve.
Yeah, so we are just at the beginning of this. And right now, the population that we're starting with a deep dive on in New York is the Yemeni population.
Mm,
And honestly, I don't know anything about the Yemeni population. It's just, it's not something that I've ever come across in my work. And, that's on me, right? That's on me.
sure.
That's on these organizations. And so what we're doing is we're doing an environment scan, right? And we're talking to Yemeni cultural-based institutions, as well as Yemeni families. I'm very fortunate. Our wonderful summer intern, Miriam, her best friend is Yemeni and spent her life growing up in the city. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this was meant to be.
Yeah.
But the thing is that, no matter what we do, we can't do anything for someone without them.
Mm,
And so the last thing I want to do is come in and say, okay, yes, we have this research proven program. We know it's great. This is what you need to make your life better. Because I don't know if that's true.
sure.
Even if our program is research proven and access to books is never a bad thing, the way you approach it, depending on who you're talking to, is going to be different every single time. And so we have to be really intentional in, creating these safe and welcoming spaces for the families that we really want to reach.
We talked about all 50 states, tons of, I mean, your reach is huge. Do you have any numbers that you can share, whether this is across the entire organization or maybe just your sort of branch of the organization, on number of families that have been served or children that have been impacted, or just anything at all?
Yeah. So for Greater New York, which covers the 5 boroughs of the city, as well as Long Island and the Hudson Valley, we serve an average of 250,000 children ages birth to 5 every single year.
Wow.
And that's not even close to all of the birth to 5-year-olds in that catchment area. And so there's always more work to be done.
Sure. I mean, we talked about your approach to this challenge and sort of trying to level the playing field. And you kind of walked me through, I was going to ask for a playbook or a step by step. And I think you kind of walked me through, they show up, they're going to get a, if no words, maybe just a couple word book, and they're going to watch the engagement of this child through that session. Is there anything else there on site that happens? Then if not, my follow-up question is, then they go home with a book, or they're going to go home with a book. What's the encouragement or the expectations at that point? Like, how do we take it from a one-time thing and force it into a habit?
Yeah. So consistency and follow-up, right, are the two biggest pieces in that, as well as a whole community approach. And so one of the biggest pieces of my job are community partnerships. And so to go back a little in the appointment, right, they get this book, it's developmentally appropriate. They're also, we do use lots of books with words in them
Yeah, of course.
too. And we're really also trying to be much more diverse and inclusive in the books that we're able to provide. And then, the pediatrician goes through the rest of the well child visit, vaccines, all those sorts of things. And then they'll schedule the next well child visit. Ideally, if the family has email and access to the internet, either, at home through their phone or through a public library, they will send a follow-up. The provider will send a follow-up email with different resources and things based on the relationship that they've created with their patient, right? creating that relationship is so important to get the parent or the caregiver to open up and talk about what's going on. And so based on that information, then they provide community-based supports. And that's really where this 2-gen approach comes into play. And our partnerships with other nonprofits, our partnerships with, the New York Public Library, of course, I couldn't stray too far from NYPL. Making sure that they're connected with their local children's librarian, not just the local branch, but really building that one-to-one relationship. Or are they food or housing insecure? And if that's the case, then who in the community can we connect them to? If they're an immigrant, do they need immigration help? Can we connect them to a free immigration lawyer? All of these different pieces, right, to really support that whole family. And then on top of that, right, to go to your other part of the question, which is how do we get this consistent and how do we get them to keep reading? A lot of it, like I said, is through the repetition in the appointments, but then it's also through all of these other community touch points. So the message that we provide at the doctor's office is going to be the same message that they're going to get at their childcare center, that they're going to get at their public library. Of course, this is not a perfect system. It doesn't work everywhere. It's something, especially in a place like New York, there's every neighborhood is different, block by block. And so we definitely have more work to do there. But having that consistent messaging reinforced in all aspects of the child's life and then their parent or caregiver's life is really what's going to keep it going. The other piece too that there's a story that I'll tell briefly that always pulls at my heartstrings. Most of the children that we serve come from low-income families. And the low-income families, children's books are expensive. I was buying books for my nephew a couple of months ago for his first birthday. And, I'm very versed in the world of children's books. But every time I go and I buy one from a local bookstore, I'm like, okay, this is $18.99. And it's
heavy. It's a heavy book. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot for a children's book.
It's a lot of money. And, you don't want them to just have one book. You want them to have a shelf full of books. And
Totally.
so, oh my gosh, the money just starts adding up and adding up. And then, you look at life costs, right? So oftentimes the books that we provide are the only books that these kids have in their home. And we have one of our hospitals in Harlem. They were working with this family who was housing insecure, and they finally got placed in some secure housing, an apartment, and they set up their child's room and put a bookshelf up and put all of the books, because even though they were housing insecure, they still brought all of these books with them wherever they went, and FaceTimed with their provider to show them that they had moved in to secure housing, to show them their son's room. And the first thing they went to was the bookshelf.
Yeah.
With all of these books. Yeah.
Yeah, that's enough.
Yeah.
That's enough.
Yeah.
First, thank you for sharing that. One of the things that I mentioned in the beginning, and you've hinted at a couple times, and I wanted to hit it right on the head, was this idea of being research-driven. I mentioned research-driven organization, and I saw on your website, I mean, there is a full tab and research after research after research, month over month over month. I mean, there are dozens of them here. Can you share a bit about maybe just the research behind this approach and some of the more relevant or frequent outcomes that you see with this approach? What the children that work at the facilities and follow the programs that we're talking about into your program, what do we see on the back end of this? Do they improve their vocab, their reading skills? Like what are we expecting to see? So I know it's a two-pronged question. What research, and then what are we expecting?
Yes. So this is where Reach Out and Read National really comes into play, because they're able to fund these incredible independent research studies to see if our program really works. And fortunately, it does. And so the biggest pieces out of this, are readiness for school, and social emotional health. So much toxic stress exists in the world today, and especially for children. And you think about the world of this last year and change, right? Pandemic babies, and pandemic preschoolers, right? And this lack of socialization because we've been cooped up for over a year, and you're missing out on so much, right? And so being able to sit down with your child with a book, right? Together is such a huge piece of this too. And sometimes I feel like that's not highlighted enough, that it's not just simply the act of handing your child a book, but it's spending time with your child with the book together. And that's also means, if you have a toddler, they might be throwing the book across the room, and that's totally perfectly normal behavior. But you're interacting with the book, you're talking about it, you're making up silly stories, whatever it may be. So that act of bonding and that positive experience can take away a lot of the toxic stress and start to replace some of these negative experiences with positive experiences. The American Academy of Pediatrics actually just published a new article a couple of weeks ago, or maybe even like a week ago at this point, about the effects of early relational health on toxic stress in pediatric primary care. And early relational health is essentially what the Reach Out and Read program is, right? It is that 2-generation approach, making sure that the whole family is supported so that they can support the child. It's really looking at the relationship between the child and the parent or caregiver on a whole versus just looking at the parent or just looking at the child, and supporting them together, not just individually. And that's what Reach Out and Read does. And so for me, yes, definitely school readiness. And there's, you can go online and you can read the research articles about, how many times more words this child will know, or more prepared they'll be to start preschool or kindergarten. But the piece for me that really, makes me so happy to wake up and go to work every day is knowing that this positive experience in a pediatric office is going to hopefully make that child's life better on the whole. It's not just the reading ability, but it's the social emotional ability. It's getting rid of those, some of the ACEs, which is the adverse childhood experiences scale that a lot of providers will use to understand, where the child is coming from and the family is coming from in life. And that's what keeps me going every single day.
Yeah. We've talked about several phases of this. One of my favorite things that you've circled back and hit a few times is your holistic approach to this problem. And it's not stick a picture book in a child's hands and say, this is going to solve it. But there's this sort of overall community, tribe, familial sort of unit that you're trying to create. And you're saying, listen, we're going to work with the doctor's office, the pediatric unit, to make sure that they're trained, that they're ready. They are going to talk with the adults. They're going to talk with the children. And there's this sort of trifecta of synergy going on. When they go home, they're able to sit down, and this social and emotional wellness that I hear you talking about. I just read Nat Eliason this morning, and he said something about, when I start to feel too overwhelmed, one of the first things I do is I go to a book, and it allows you to sort of pull yourself away from what's going on, right, and distract you. I love the idea of sitting down with a family member, father, mother, brother, around a book at a very early age, and starting to ingrain this idea of like, this is a way to get away. This is something that we all do. This is a way to learn, absorb, grow. Like, it's something to go to. And there's so many benefits that I think we all know of reading. And I think so many of us wait so long to get into it that it's hard to get that wheel start, sort of turning. At this point, we've talked about the challenge and really what you're trying to do and how we're trying to level the playing field and where you guys focus. We've talked about the impact and the overall impact of the organization and how many students and families you guys are involved with. At this point, I'm thinking many of the listeners are saying, okay, this place works. There's research behind it, continued research behind it. How do we add gasoline? How do we add fuel to the fire and build momentum? So my question sort of twofold. Maybe there's local support, right? Because you guys have many footprints across the United States. How can someone get involved locally? And then I'm assuming there's another avenue of if someone wanted to donate books or money or cap, whatever that is, how can people get involved?
Sure. So one quick thing I'll add that I feel like I need to throw in before I get to the how to help is that another reason this works too is because we meet families where they are. They're already going to the pediatric office. And so much of what we do, especially first-time parents, we're asking them to do all of these things, right? And you have to add on another visit somewhere, another, oh, I have to go to this other institution to do this other thing to help enrich my child's life. And we want to make it easier by meeting them where they are and not stacking on something else that they have to add to their to-do list.
That's a great point. Yeah. Instead of taking them to some sort of like after school program and it's like you have to go pick them up and then take them here, and it's adding an additional step and making it more complex. This is already in the plans. It's already in the agenda. While you're there, we're going to improve. That's that's a great plug.
So we there are a million ways to support. Of course, funding is the biggest, right? So specifically for New York, we serve 250,000 kids a year, and we currently only meet 50% of the book need for these families. And so when they go in, that means they're not necessarily going to receive a book every time. They'll receive the same information, but we don't have enough funding to provide every child with a book right now. And so funding is huge with that. And I will say too, we're a teeny tiny team. We're 5 full-time staff, working with over 230 hospitals and clinics. And yeah, our first hurdle is just getting every child a book that at the clinics that we work with.
What a crazy ratio though, right? Like five staff, 250,000 children. That's an insane ratio.
It's bonkers. Yeah. Please fund us. Yeah. So definitely funding, which is on our website, which is reachoutandreadnyc.org. And then if you do /donate, it'll bring you directly to our donate page. But also, if you don't want to donate funds, you can donate books. Most of our sites, especially due to COVID, are only accepting brand new books. Some of our locations are accepting gently used books. And the rule there with gently used books is please do not give us a book that you wouldn't give your own child. You'd be surprised some of the donations we get, and people think they're being charitable. And I've opened a box full of cockroaches. Yes, fun times. So we obviously prefer new books. We want this to be a very positive experience for the child and their family. But there are some, gently loved books that we love too. There's a book donation form on our website as well. Again, it's reachoutandreadnyc.org. And we will either, we work with everyone from large publishing companies who will donate pallets of books to us, like Scholastic and Pampers partnered to donate about 20,000 books to us in early summer. And we have a storage unit where we can receive those in mass and then ship them out. And then we also work with individuals. I actually have a woman who called me up the other day, and she lives in the neighborhood. And she said, I have about 25 picture books gently used. Can I drop them off at your apartment? And so my apartment also doubles as a book receiving depot.
Yeah, storage drop off.
So, no donation is too small, and that goes book wise, monetary wise. We've worked with some really incredible children's book authors who donate their own books or run fundraisers to raise money to print at cost editions of their books for us, which has been really incredible. And then the other piece too is that we need volunteers. Not so much in person right now. Eventually we'll go back to in person where you can volunteer to read books in the waiting room as children are waiting to see the doctor. But for now, in the pandemic, we pivoted to provide virtual read alouds, which we offer every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on our Facebook page. And we're always looking for volunteer readers, especially readers who speak languages other than English. It's just been really great, a great way to connect with the families through this virtual setting. And then we also run virtual workshops for parents and caregivers. And we've covered everything from how to create a literacy-friendly household on, a $0 budget to discussing race and racism using children's books. We brought in guest speakers from, the different pediatricians, as well as like the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. Really just trying to bring as many experts and resources to the families that we serve. And I'll say too, I made it a family affair. I'm half Colombian. I don't look it. My Spanish is terrible, but my dad was born and raised there, and so his volunteer during the pandemic was translating all of our workshops into Spanish.
Nice.
So we could at least have 2 languages available for the New York community.
Awesome. Lots and lots of ways to get involved. An awesome organization. I mean, we talked about the ratio. The impact is insane. So this is an area that we could be pouring gas. I appreciate all the information, all of the resources and ways to get involved that we've discussed. We'll make sure that's linked in the show notes. For those of you that are listening, if you enjoyed this episode, please press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app. That will show the algorithms that this is an important conversation, so more people can learn about the importance of not only reading and learning, but finding ways to invest in and improve the youth so that we are all guaranteed a stronger and better future. Ms. Kristen, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.